So then you showed me where your evidence is coming from. Do you mind quickly showing me the evidences that you showed last time?
Okay.
I don't want to misquote you.
So the first evidence was from the Bible. So I said in the New Testament, you have the name Jesus in the Greek, which was used for Jesus, and you also had the Greek Jesus again, which was used for the companion of Moses. So they had the same name, which was my argumentation. So my argument.
So that's one piece of evidence that you provided.
Yes.
And
then I said we had Josephus.
Okay. Where did you get the Josephus information from? That he believed that the name of Jesus is actually from Hebrew Yeshua?
Well, we would first of all have to understand, if you use the name Jesus, there's only limited possibilities of what names it can come from. So for example, when you said if someone is called Unga Bunga or whatever, if one person A is called Unga Bunga, person B is called Unga Bunga, and person C is called Jinga Janga, you would logically conclude that A and B would have had the same name, and C had a different name. You wouldn't use two different names, use the same name for two different people if they had different names.
But you're using logic now, in terms of actual
deductive reasoning.
Actual evidence from Josephus.
Yes.
Because you also showed something from the Brill Encyclopedia of the Quran.
Yes.
Did you read the whole section, not whole section, the whole article, which is about Jesus, and the relevant section about his name from the Encyclopedia?
Yes.
Okay. And it said about that his name, Muslim scholars it's perplexing, it's perplexing, isn't it?
Yes.
What did it say about Josephus there? What did they quote Josephus?
Yes, they did.
And what did Josephus?
So basically,
because you didn't say that last time. So
okay.
what did Josephus actually?
So in the
say?
Old Hebrew, because there was no vowelization, you had the consonants, which is where we get etymology from. So Josephus referenced 3 other people in the Bible whose name had the same consonants. So there's a possibility it could have been one of 4. First of all, like if the name Jesus is used. But then what they go to confirm is because the Bible clarifies the meaning of his name, the others can be discounted. Because the consonant for Yeshua is Y, is a Yod, Shin, so and so.
So Josephus, the evidence he provided for the name, let's read from this encyclopedia.
Yes.
Okay? So this is probably what you read, right? Rather than the encyclopedia article. So there was a Wikipedia article. Is this what you're reading from?
Nope.
Because
I actually have the Brill Encyclopedia.
Yeah, so do I. So when you read the Brill Encyclopedia, what did it actually say? So let me read it to you, okay? From the encyclopedia itself.
Okay.
Here. So about Josephus, right? Josephus, this is point number 3. Yes. Josephus used the Greek name Jesus to denote 3 people mentioned in the Bible whose Hebrew names were not Yeshua.
Yes.
So now we see already last time, you have been very selective and very misrepresenting Josephus.
Okay.
So Josephus used Jesus to refer to other people whose name was not Yeshua.
Yes.
Very clearly this is what he's saying.
Okay.
They're not even, he says, let me continue reading the text. Josephus used the Greek name Jesus to denote 3 people mentioned in the Bible whose Hebrew names were not Yeshua, Yehoshua, or Yehoshua.
Okay.
They were Saul's son, Ishvi, anglicized as Ishvi in the RSV of 1 Samuel 14:49. The Levite Abishua, mentioned in 1 Chronicles 6:4, etc. And Ishwa, the son of Asher, anglicized as Ishva in the RSV of Genesis 46:17. So the Josephus that you use to provide evidence for your support for your argument is actually saying this is not an evidence at all, because Josephus used the name Isus, referring to other people who were called what? Abishua, Ishvi, Ishwa. Does it sound like Yeshua?
It's based on a consonant.
Wait. Does it sound like Yeshua?
It's based on the consonant.
Does it sound like Yeshua?
So say your question again.
When I pronounce this name, Isus, I want to know what the actual name was.
Yes.
So now he says these names are actually from
Yes.
Ishwi.
Yeah.
Does it sound like Yeshua?
Doesn't need to.
Abishua? Does it sound like Yeshua?
Doesn't need to.
Ishwa? Does it sound like Yeshua? It doesn't. This is what Brill Encyclopedia itself says. Josephus used the name Isus, referring to other people who were not Yeshua, Yehoshua, or Yehoshua.
Yes.
So Josephus' evidence goes against you. In fact, Josephus consolidates my point, where it says, when we have this Greek name, Isus, is it a translation from Ishvi? Is it a translation from Ishwi or Ishvi or Abishua or Ishwa or Ishva or Yeshua? So can you be certain? Now if we now continue the conclusion of Brilliant Encyclopedia, what do they say? By way of conclusion. I'm sure you've read it, right? But you hid that information last time. Selective quotation. By way of conclusion, it is worth summarizing the salient features of the debate about the origins of the Quranic form of Jesus' name. It is not certain that Jesus' original name was Yeshua.
Okay.
Do you want to have a look at it?
I know.
You know. And yet, you somehow bring Brilliant Encyclopedia as an evidence, which goes against you. Now, this is my point. So, the evidence that you provided is an evidence against you. You asked me, bring me some other scholars who supports my view. Because what was my view? I am not certain, which is totally in line with Brilliant Encyclopedia says. We are not certain in the debate what the name is, Isus coming from. Now, when we go and check, what do we find? Clement of Alexandria, he considered the name Jesus to be of actual Greek origin, not a translation of the name from Hebrew Yeshua. Do you know Clement of Alexandria? Very well-known scholarly of your historical tradition of Christianity. Whether you've removed him after 500 years to be a church father, regardless of that, he is a well-known scholar in early Christianity, right? Clement of Alexandria. What about the other person? Is it Cyril of... let me show you who it is. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem. They consider, this is in Catholic Encyclopedia, as well as in the Wikipedia article that you can get this links from. So I went directly to Catholic Encyclopedia, I went to the information in the Brilliant Encyclopedia, and I found that yes, there are other scholars who consider the name Jesus is actually a Greek name. What are you going to say about that?
Jesus is a Greek name.
No, the name is not a translation of any other Hebrew name. This is what Clement of Alexandria is arguing. So it is not a translation of Yeshua or Yahushua. So now you have a big problem. Is Isus a translation of Ishvi, Ashvi, Abishua, Ishwa, Ershua, Yehoshua, right? You have no certainty, just like what I claim. You have no way of determining what it is.
Okay. So now, let me address all your
Go ahead.
First of all, yeah, you are correct in that Jesus can be used for other names. Firstly, when we go to the scripture, it tells you the meaning behind the name, that God will save. This is the same, so it comes from Yeho saves. So the Bible itself gives you the meaning of the name. That's why when you look at the Greek, you know it's not the other names, because every name has a different meaning. What you're saying, does this name sound like that name? That's what we call homophones, and you're making a mistake. For example, if I say night with a K and night with an N, they sound similar, but they have different meanings. Now, if I go and write that in an English test, and I say at night time with a K, I will fail my exam. So your point that it should sound similar is actually not a point itself. It just has to translate to the same. So that's why when I originally told you that in the Greek they did not have the letter shin or the letter Y, so they had to use an iota instead. So now going back to your point of Josephus, just for the cameras, I'll show you as well. That is the rendition in Aramaic, this word here. That's the Aramaic, that word right there. So the funny thing is, Josephus was actually translated into Syriac and Arabic. So now, if you can see here, that is the word I've highlighted for Yeshua. You see, early church fathers, this is actually Josephus's quote in Syriac. So I'm just showing you again, that is the word that I've highlighted. So we've
Translation of what to what?
This is in Syriac, which is old format.
No, translation of what?
Of the name that...
This particular text is of
yeah,
what?
this is a testimony of Flavidium, which is Josephus, where he wrote the text that historians refer to, that he mentioned Jesus. It was
and
translated.
When is this translation from? Which century?
This is from the... They believe it's as early as the 5th century. So now Mansur will say, well, how did we know? It's very unlikely that they would have translated it into another language without actually understanding what the translation was.
5th century, 500 years later. Okay.
The Arabic text, which again I've highlighted the word.
Translated when?
This was in the 10th century.
10th century.
Yes.
So you have 1,000 years later, right?
That's
okay.
Right. Just so you can see the evidence, because this is the same text of Josephus. That's the word Yeshua. Now,
so a translation from 500 years later and a translation, 1,000 years later is an evidence.
Now we have multiple sources confirming the same thing, pretty much. Maybe you might have one or two disagreements, as Mansur might say. Now I want you to look at this person, because in biblical literature, you obviously have the Greek, you have the Peshitta. The Peshitta is in Syriac, which is Middle Aramaic, so it's very close to what Jesus would have spoken. It's more of an advanced reason. So actually, before I spoke to Mansur, I want everyone just to see this. His name is Sebastian Brock. His name is Sebastian Brock. He's a scholar at Oxford University. Anyone can go and Google his name. It says Sebastian Paul Brock, FBA, is generally acknowledged as the foremost academic in the field of Syriac today. I actually emailed him about this. Here's my email. You can see the email too. And I'll read what he says, because I asked him where did the name come from. He said, the Syriac forms of the name have nothing directly to do with the Greek, Jesus, but will have come from early Syriac-speaking Christians by the way of Jewish Aramaic, so presumably reached the Old Syriac and Peshitta Gospels by oral tradition. The name will have been very familiar long before anyone thought of translating the Greek Gospels into Syriac. Since vocalization signs were not introduced at all about the 7th or 8th century, there is no way of knowing about how the consonants Y-S-H-W, which is the consonants that I've been telling you about, were pronounced by early Syriac-speaking Christians. But at the time of the vocalization, the Eastern and Western Syriac traditions of pronunciation had diverged. So one had Isho, and the other had Yeshua. So now we have one of the foremost scholars of Syriac language, and I even had this
giving his opinion rather than an evidence.
I spoke to Mansur last week, but I didn't need to bring as evidence. This is one of the foremost scholars on Syriac language. If Mansur wants to bring me a counter scholar who can then disprove and say what his alternate name would have been, I will be happy to discuss that evidence. But we have confirmation from an Oxford scholar, one of the most leading scholars. He said the name did not come from the Greek, because when we talk about source primacy, which I was talking about the other week, is that Peshitta tries to claim source primacy. They say they got it from Jesus directly. But scholars have noticed that there's certain forms or certain phrases in the Peshitta that would have only come from the from the Greek. So most scholars will agree that the Peshitta came from the Greek. But he's confirmed the name didn't even come from the Greek. It's come through oral tradition.
Okay, let me respond to this. So, as the habitual
Yes.
way we see the Christians, missionaries bring along evidence.
Yes.
Nothing different.
Okay.
So you're bringing an opinion of a scholar. Maybe.
An opinion and
Are you gonna let me speak, or are you
but
going
this is
to?
what we call a fallacy.
Are you going to let me speak, both of you? Can you stop your cameraman to?
Let me just finish my point.
Excuse me.
Let me just finish my point.
End of discussion.
No.
Okay. Look.
Okay.
I let you speak, and now I'm responding, and somehow.
Okay.
You're not happy with that. You're not comfortable with it.
that's
Right.
fine.
So as I said, 15 minutes. Remember, we agreed on a discussion. Nearly 15 minutes coming towards end. So we need to wrap it up very quickly.
Okay.
So the evidence that you're bringing, again, an opinion of a renowned scholar. Remember, at the very outset from last time we had a discussion, it is not the opinions of a scholar that it's counted. Evidence is not opinions of scholars. Evidence has to be real evidence. So which manuscript, which inscription, that is what evidence is. So you didn't provide anything from that scholar, because I can, like remember you said, find me one scholar, name me one scholar that agrees with my position, which I did today. Clement of Alexandria. I didn't give you one, I gave two. No, I didn't give two, I gave three. Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, and I gave Josephus. You are interrupting. And even Josephus himself. That yes, the name Jesus, which you think the Greek name is from Yeshua, is actually not a certain name where it's coming from. You talk about only consonantal skeleton, but actually if you look at it, he's translated this name from Ishvi, Ashvi, Abishua, and a few others. So going, really refuting your claim that the name Josephus mentions, Jesus, is coming from Yeshua or Yahushua, when he himself mentions other people other than these names, using the word Jesus. So that refutes your claim altogether. Secondly, when you say, give me a scholar, are you saying that scholar in Oxford knows better than Clement of Alexandria? So when Clement of Alexandria is used and saying, he says this is a Greek name, this is the name of Christ in the original Greek, not from any other. So it's not a translated name, it's actually originated within Greek, and he gives you the Greek form where it's coming from if you were to bother to check. So now I have given you counter evidence by scholars of the past. We are closer to the time to tell you Jesus is not the name coming from Yeshua or Yahushua. So instead of giving me evidence, what you've given me again, look, a work that has been translated 500 years later, when already Christianity have accepted by their traditions that name is this, Yeshua. Or 1,000 years later in an Arabic translation, this name is Yeshua. These are already what we call popular belief within the people who are translating. But if we go back to the time, closer to the time we're referring to, at the time Christ was alive, of course, we want to know what's the original Aramaic, that he was given his name by his mother. You think it's Hebrew, but you have no evidence for it, because you have a Greek writer in the 80s or something, writing and saying this is what his name is. That is what I'm saying is, you have no evidence, it's just opinions and suggestions. That is why the name, either Yeshua, and so on, these are all guesswork. So as I started from the very beginning, last time I met you on this issue, your belief, which is based on your evidence, but your evidence base is what? All guesswork and assumptions. So I am consistently saying, the scholars are with me. You cannot be certain, because there's no certainty about what this original name is, as clearly Encyclopedia of the Quran by the Brill publishers are clearly saying. And they say possibility exists that it could be Isa, or so on and so forth. So the point is, I think, is established beyond a shadow of doubt by using the evidence that you tried to support, which goes against you, that yes, the name about Isa alayhi salam is not Jesus, Latinized, because that's not what his mom called him. It's not even Jesus, because it's a Greek translation. What was the name given by his mom? You don't know. I rest my case.
Now,
Do you have anything else to say
Mansur
within the
has
next
made-
2-3 minutes?
Mansur has made many fallacies in his argumentation.
2-3 minutes.
The first
You
of
take the
all,
last word.
He said that if there's no manuscripts, therefore it's unreliable. But when we go to Islamic literature, especially the hadiths, we cannot find anything written. But they will use an argumentation of chains of narration. But then, by Mansur's own standard, we should reject this and